So I met Peter and Sylvia on their first day in the United States. I can still see them. Peter was 5, Sylvia was 7. They had just come in, having been adopted by our new next-door neighbor from an orphanage in Hungary. They were small and dark hair and dark eyes, shy and smiling, and they wanted to come over because they heard our 3 children playing, and they wanted to meet some American children. They spoke no English, so their play with our children was dress up, where Peter wore a Goldilocks wig and ran around with a lightsaber, and Sylvia would draw pictures to try and communicate with us what they needed or they wanted. Now, being kids who had been in an orphanage in Hungary, they were food deprived a lot. So when snack time came, Peter grabbed fistfuls of cookies. And when they went to go home, I caught him secretly trying to put an apple in his pocket. So I drew a picture of an apple with a smile on it and an arrow pointing at his house so he could kind of figure out it was okay to take the apple. And he took the apple, and the next time he came over to play with our kids, he filled a Power Ranger backpack with my entire fruit bowl. And that was fine. They came over a lot for play dates, and we stayed friends even when we moved across town. Even when the mom divorced the adopted dad, she had said that he was not able to take care of them and had neglected them and maybe put them in harm's way. So they often visited, but they never called. And one night when I was checking voicemail, I was surprised to hear Peter's voice. He was 11, and I heard him say, "Rose, you have to come right away. Mom is in the hospital and nobody's with us and we're scared. Please come and get us." So my husband and I got there, and it turned out she had passed out, and she said it would just be a few days, and we said, "We'll take them home with us." And they settled in really easily with our kids, and they just went to school and we had dinner together. And one night at dinner, Peter looked at the table and he pointed at everything on the table, and he said, "When are you going to stop treating us like company? Every night you have all these choices for dinner. You have meat and rice and bread and salad. When do we get regular dinner?" And my oldest, with great curiosity, said, "Well, what's regular dinner at your house?" And he said, "Mom makes a can of soup, and we split that, and we each get a piece of bread." And it got quiet. And I looked up and said, "This is regular dinner at our house." And Sylvia said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We never see food like this unless we're celebrating holidays at other people's houses." Now, feeding 5 children was a bit of a chore, but we were pretty good with that. That was okay. And it wasn't until they started telling us their secrets that it became hard. Like, if they misbehaved, their mom wouldn't let them out to play. They only could go to school, and they had to go right to their rooms. And Peter would throw things to be let out of his room, and she would tie him to his bunk bed. And I noticed that he had scars on his arms and his chest and his legs. And when I asked him about it, he'd say, "Oh, there was this kid at school, and he was picking on me, and we got into a fight, and I really beat him up," or "I fell down." And when I'd be at school, the teachers would pull me aside and whisper in my ear that they wanted to call DSS, but there was no evidence. And I thought, I have to say something about this. So I went up to the hospital to see her. They had been with us for many days. It was actually going into a couple of weeks. And when I got to her room, it was empty. So I went to the desk to ask about her, and the nurse said, "She's gone." So I said, "Gone like discharged? Gone like transferred? Gone like dead?" Because no one's telling me anything. And this nurse looked at me and said, "You're not family." And I said, "Please, I have her children." And the nurse said, "There's nothing I can do. Maybe you want to call DSS." Now, we didn't want to call DSS, and we didn't want to tell them, so we kept it a secret. We figured she'd have to turn up in a few days, and the days turned into a week, that turned into 2 weeks. And they're making cards for me to give her at the hospital. And I'm not saying anything, keeping it a secret. And finally, my husband and I realized we can't keep this secret anymore. We have to tell them. And we want to tell them in a place where we can focus on them, where we're not getting the questions from our children about it. We really want to focus on them, and we're trying to figure out the right place to do this. And it's not like you can do a Google search for a right place to tell adopted children their mom has abandoned them. Where do you go? So we decided to go someplace nearby, a place where they could get pizza, we could get wine, and, you know, the dining room would be big enough that maybe we could kind of blend in, nobody would notice. So we took them to Paparazzi, which probably isn't a great marketing thing for them, but we did. And when we got there, the kids were just mesmerized by it all. And when we sat down before Sylvia opened the menu, she said, "I've got to ask you something. This is really important." And I could feel my blood just chill, waiting for the question about their mom. And she said, "Can I have tiramisu for dinner?" And I was so relieved. I said, "Okay, right, tiramisu for dessert, certainly." And without even saying anything, my husband and I knew we were not going to tell them until dessert. So dessert came, and the tiramisu is served. We tell them about their mom. And Sylvia just burst into tears. And Peter says, "Yeah, I knew she was going to leave us. She's finally gone." And Sylvia climbed into my husband's lap, and I scooped up Peter into mine, and they just cried. And I stroked his hair and leaned into him while he sobbed in the middle of this bustling dining room. And when I looked up into my husband's eyes, our faces were just covered in tears. And holding each child with one arm, we just reached out our hands to each other and held each other's hands. And in that moment, we surrendered to just caring for them and loving them. We surrendered to new roles in their lives. They were no longer visitors. They were not going home. We were their home. Thank you.